When I was growing up, one of the main TV networks, I think it was NBC, had a summer campaign called It's New to You. This was back in the days when new TV shows were basically only released during the school season, and they were released one at a time, and you could only watch them live. The horror. But those new to you shows were always worth watching, even if I had seen them before. This season, I'm re-releasing 9 meaningful episodes of the nearly 150 in the Graced Health podcast library. Perhaps you missed them and they're new to you, or perhaps you might find they reach you now in a different way that they did when they were initially put out there. You'll still get the new, shorter Ask the Trainer episodes, so keep tuning in on Thursdays and enjoy this one. Hey there, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. Joining the show today is Roberta Anding, a sports dietitian and just fantastic resource for fueling your teen athlete. I have 2 myself, and I learned so much. Roberta Anding is a registered dietitian, and she's the clinical and sports dietitian for the Baylor College of Medicine corporate programs team. She's an assistant professor in the Baylor College of Medicine Department of Orthopedic Surgery. She's on faculty at Rice University, where she serves as the sports dietitian for the Rice Owls. She's currently the sports dietitian for the 2017 world champion Houston Astros MLB franchise. Yeah, I told you, she's big time. And she's the former sports dietitian for the Houston Texans NFL franchise and the Houston Ballet. Just so you know, I have taken a lot of notes on this conversation. I did it for me because there was so much she offered us. And then I thought, you might want this too. So I have this. When you're done, head over to gracedhealth.com/fuel your teen athlete, all one word, like I'm saying it real fast, fuel your teen athlete. And you can get the notes. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Roberta Anding as much as I had having it. I feel like you have such a wide array of wisdom and nutrition information that could be beneficial to my listeners. But I really wanted to hone in today on fueling our teen athletes. Most of my listeners are women. Most of us have children who are middle school, high school age. And I tell you what, there's a lot of noise out there about nutrition that we get confused about. And it can be even a little bit more confusing and overwhelming when we're talking about our teens and their athletic needs. So I wondered if we could just start out, if there was something, if you were in the conversation with someone or if you're talking to a teen athlete, do you have any just overall like, hey, you're an athlete, this is what you need to be doing, or I'd really love to see you making these changes. I mean, just kind of general overall guidance.
Sure. And these are all really good points because the internet, et cetera, is littered with clutter on nutrition, and what works for an adult really doesn't work necessarily for an adolescent. And so by nature, younger adolescents, and I'm talking about late middle school, early high school, tend to be more concrete thinkers. And that means it's black and white, it's right or wrong, I eat this or I don't. It just really tends to be that definitive. Later on, adolescents become more abstract. And so you could say, I don't want you to have sweet drinks. And they'd say, okay, well, that probably is soda, but does that mean sweet tea? So they're able to abstract a little bit more. So when I'm working with a teen athlete, it's really important for me to know where are they developmentally. Because I can, if they need black and white, they need a ton of structure, I can provide that. And so can moms and dads. So it's important to get that understanding of where they are developmentally before you decide what kind of direction you're going to give them. I will say to adolescents all the time, if you're too busy to eat breakfast, you're too busy to be good. And so you're going to struggle, not only academically, but athletically if you have PE your first or second period, if you go out of the house empty. So understanding where they are developmentally and then honing in on that breakfast meal, because that's oftentimes the most difficult one for adolescents and their parents to provide before they're dashing out for school in the morning.
Yes. As a parent of two teens, I completely agree with you. And you just blew my mind though with what you're saying about where are they developmentally, because I know for me it took a long time to be out of the concrete black and white. And that was just kind of my own progression of like, oh, well, what works for someone else may not work for me, or whatever that is.
Right.
And so understanding that approaching our children and what is going to be received well by them makes a big difference. That's wow. We could stop right now. I'd be great.
And I think, the question I usually ask, Amy, is the question on sweet drinks. So if I tell an adolescent, I need you to stay away from sweet drinks, can you name them for me? And I usually get soda.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they stop and they're really thinking about it and they can't come up with sweet tea or lemonade, fruit punch, energy drinks, they can't come up with one more, that really does tell me I need to do something differently. I need to prescribe more for them what they need to eat rather than engage them. And sometimes it comes across as, well, I told you not to drink sweet drinks. And you might have said that, but they're not able to come up with that. And ironically, about 25% of adults really are never good abstractors. So to me, as a sports dietitian, I need to understand the best way to educate somebody versus me just handing out a meal plan. I take care of Rice athletics, and I have to say that 99% of my Rice athletes are really good at abstracting, but there's a couple that just really can't. And again, it comes across as sometimes as obstinance, and it really isn't. It's developmental.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And that actually leads into one of the questions that I had. And then as I polled my community, because I was like, hey, I've got this great interview coming. What are your questions? A lot of the questions surrounded buy-in for our adolescents and our teens. I mean, there's a lot. We don't know everything, but I think most of my listeners, they are smart. They know, they
Sure.
kind of get the health thing. Converting that down to our children is a totally different story. And I talk about stuff like this all the time at home. But does that mean that my son has not driven himself to Whataburger about 10 times over the holiday break? No. So, do you have any suggestions on how to create the buy-in? How do we get them to get on board with understanding this relationship between fueling ourselves and performance?
Well, I think there's a couple ways that you can approach it, and if you've followed the story of Mary Kane, this really elite distance runner in high school, and she called herself the fastest girl in the world, and in high school she got really bad nutrition information as a collegiate runner and was injured and hurt. And so to me, her story highlights that nutrition really does matter. The way you fuel your body does matter. And the dilemma is parents can be unbelievably wise. They can have a really great knowledge, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners do. It's not the message, it's the messenger. So I'll give you my personal example. My daughter, Katie, was a high school athlete and went on to run track and field and play basketball in college. And at the time she was in high school, I worked for the Houston Texans. I couldn't get her to do anything. And she'd say, well, Mom, you don't know basketball. And I said, well, I'm smart enough to work for the football team here in town. It wasn't until she was like a junior in college that she even asked me for my advice. And so sometimes finding an external messenger might be better. It may be a coach, and that can be a little dicey, but it may be a coach. It may be, if your school is fortunate enough to have a certified athletic trainer, they can oftentimes be really great sources of nutritional wisdom, because that is in their scope of practice to talk about nutrition and sports performance. So sometimes, again, it's finding that external, whether it's through the media stories. Certainly, there have been athletes recently, Cam Newton and a few others, that decided to go vegan and didn't go well. It didn't go well. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes reading stories about your heroes or people that you admire may be different than mom and dad. And then mom and dad can also take a look at what are the key messages that you're interested in getting across. One, you have to hydrate. Everything else is, I'm going to say, a plan B, because if you're dehydrated, you are going to have a decrement in your performance. You are not going to be able to work to full capacity. So helping your athlete by saying, I put an extra water bottle in your bag for you today. And sometimes moms and dads absolutely do need to help their high schoolers and middle schoolers, for sure, come up with a fueling strategy. And so it's hydration, it's eating 3 meals, and then be willing to say there is no perfect nutrition. And I'll raise my hand, there is no perfect nutrition, but can I make your nutrition better than it was yesterday? And that's the goal. So if your son's going to Whataburger, then you know what? And he's going because there's a pretty good chance you're seeing wrappers, or somewhere along the line there's a clue that Whataburger was being consumed, that it's all right. Well, then for dinner tonight, I'm going to do a big fruit salad. I'm going to do an extra vegetable. I'll put in some frozen broccoli and get more plants on the plate, more healthier options for your family at night. Because again, teens eat about 25 to 30% of their calories away from home. So the buy-in has to be, who are your external sources? So where are you getting your information from? And then what are parents willing to do to make nutrition over that 24 hours better than it was yesterday?
I love that. Do you think it's helpful when parents see articles to text those to their kids and say, hey, I read this? I mean, do you think that creates enough of a distance between the parent and the child, and being like an article or something they saw on Instagram, which I know can be a little, I mean, from the personal trainer side, I know that's a little dicey in itself, but is that a good medium to reach them without you saying this is how it needs to be?
I think that it depends on your child. From my children, my daughter would have thought I was nagging. My son would have said, awesome, thanks. So it really depends on the child and their ability to take in that information and find it relevant to them. Again, my family was very fortunate. My younger son, I'm going to say, essentially grew up at Reliant/NRG Stadium with athletes all around him. And he saw that nobody ate perfectly, but they really did focus in on hydration and training. So a lot of it just depends. There is a great website that you could just send them the link to, and it's one of my professional organizations, and it's SCAN, like I'm going to scan a document, SCAN DPG, which stands for Dietetic Practice Group. So scandpg.org, and they have these fabulous little fact sheets on, I'm so tired in practice, what could it be? Or I don't have time for breakfast. And they're one-pagers. They're not designed to be a scientific article, but they're designed to take the science and help to translate it to the plate. So that may be an option. And then a lot of my sports nutrition colleagues, probably most notably Nancy Clark, has written a whole series of really nice sports nutrition books with easy to follow recipes. Again, depending on what your family focuses and your individual athlete. I have some athletes who say, I'll eat dirt if you tell me to eat dirt. And then other people saying, yeah, but I'm still going to eat gummy bears for my snack. So a lot of it, again, really just depends on that individual child.
That makes a lot of sense. And I will definitely link that in the show notes. That's going to be just a wealth of information. And I actually read that Nancy Clark's, one of her books. Gosh, it was years ago when it was still on like the 10th edition or something like that. She is a really great resource. Yeah, she is too.
Terrific resource. Yep.
Can I hone in and get a little more granular? Because again, going back to the noise and the confusion for us as adults and then filtering that down to our kids, there's a lot of questions about their protein needs. And are they different in an athlete versus a non-athlete? I would love your thoughts. I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you and then you can filter through and answer it however you want. But protein powders, what are your thoughts on those? Types of protein supplements, if you feel like that's a good thing. And so I'm sure you get this question all the time, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that because that is really confusing.
Yeah, athletes do need more protein than the average person, but then you have to step back and say, well, what does the science tell us about their overall consumption patterns now? So male athletes, high schoolers, the requirement is going to be somewhere in the range of 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, or loosely translated about a gram per pound of body weight. And the question is, can I count grams? Do I know how to do that? Bottom line is you do need more protein. Probably what's oftentimes missing in this equation is the distribution of protein. And what I mean by the distribution of protein is you got to have protein at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a bedtime snack. Muscles build and repair, and adolescence is the definition of building muscle. Muscles build and repair 24 hours a day. So if I have let's say a Pop-Tart for breakfast, and then at lunch I might have a peanut butter sandwich, and I get home at night and have a 10-ounce steak. You might meet your protein needs by doing that. You haven't really addressed the muscle need, which is breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a bedtime snack. So to me, simple ways of getting that protein, and then I'll address protein powders. It could be for breakfast that you make overnight oatmeal, because I'm inherently lazy. You make overnight oatmeal and you put in a half a cup, assuming no dairy allergy, a half a cup of dry milk powder, that Carnation dry milk powder, to the oatmeal. And you cook it overnight, add some peanut butter to it, and then you can boost the protein of oatmeal. It's already fixed. You can, eat 5 or 6 really big bites, wash it down with a glass of milk. And in terms of protein, dairy and soy, cow's milk and soy are going to be the two with adequate amounts of protein. The rest of the milks do not. And now you've got something quick and easy to go. So it's still a quick and easy breakfast. Alternatively, you could make a ham and cheese sandwich the night before and pop it in the microwave for 10 seconds as you're walking out the door, maybe even be fancy and put it on an English muffin. And now in 10 seconds, you've got a portable breakfast sandwich that you can walk out the door, have a juice box of chocolate milk, and now you've got somewhere in the range of 20 grams of protein. So it's important to make sure that that protein distribution is there. The recent evidence on eating protein before you go to bed at night physiologically makes sense, because all of us make more growth hormone when we sleep than when we're awake. It's one of those hormones that's nicely regulated by circadian rhythm. And so if you eat protein before you go to bed at night, half a sandwich, beef jerky, a yogurt smoothie, a small amount of protein before you go to bed at night, when your growth hormone is surging, you have a better chance of building and repairing muscle than if you skip that pre-sleep protein. So protein, again, distribution is important. I really like people to, rather than count grams, certainly at lunch and most importantly dinner, look at your dinner plate and say a third of that needs to be protein. So a third protein at lunch, third protein at dinner, rather than counting grams. And for a lot of folks, we like to count because there's apps for that. But if you don't know the number you're counting to, it becomes a little futile and you're wasting your time doing something that probably isn't going to get you the results that you need.
Right. And I think it's a little unrealistic to ask our children to count things as well. That seems like that's just one more thing that they're having to do or something like that. And I want to go.
No, it's one more thing that's not fun. And then it almost food becomes an obsession rather than enjoyment. And I really fundamentally am opposed to making food a chore as much as possible. Sometimes you have to. When people have really high calorie needs, they need to eat a lot, and food does become a job. But for most of us, you want to make sure that you enjoy your food and you don't think, oh, gee, I wonder if I met my protein needs. So just organize your plate.
I love that. And I like too your suggestion about the ham and cheese sandwich, because I think we are caught in this, well, breakfast food is for breakfast, and that's eggs and waffles or whatever that is. And we seem to categorize our meals, but there's no reason to do that. If something else works, or even like the ham and cheese sandwich. I mean, what a great on the go availability that you can make ahead of time, and then you're not even having to think about it, because the on the go is boy, one of my kids used to get up and he just wanted 30 minutes to like hang out after he was ready, and now he is racing out the door with like 1.3 seconds to spare.
Right, because sleep is important, and adolescents actually their biological clock shifts a little bit. Easy for them to stay up at night. A struggle to get up in the morning. Biologically, a struggle. It's just tough. And so some school districts throughout the United States have actually started school later, because the kids come to school and they fall asleep in class because it just doesn't fit their own biological clock. And now we say, just get up 5 minutes earlier to eat breakfast. And that's probably going to be a fail.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. 5 minutes does seem to make a huge difference when you're that age. And I can certainly appreciate the biological difference in that age.
Yes.
I have.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But it's funny. I keep telling myself to remember how I was at that age, and I remember being in high school and thinking, well, if I get up by 10:30, I'm doing great. I mean, come on, no one can be mad at me for getting up at 10:30. And of course, by that time, if my kid's sleeping in, we had to wake one of them up at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., earlier. So, yes, their circadian rhythms are definitely very different than mine right now. Can you talk to us a little bit and give us some guidance on preparing our kids and fueling them well before practice, after practice? I mean, a lot of us have kids who are in practice after school several nights a week, and then they'll have tournaments or games where it's all day, and just and help us figure out exactly about pre-fueling, refueling, just kind of setting them up to do well and to feel well and function well, as obviously as well as perform.
Yeah, and I think this is a particular challenge for those high school athletes who may play high school baseball and then they're on an additional select team where they have practice now after practice.
Exactly.
So when you think about what you need to have for the fuel for exercising muscle, the two things that are most important are going to be carbohydrate and fluid. So depending on the amount of time you have really depends on your fueling choice. So for example, let's say football practice is 3:30 after school, and you got the lunch period at 11:30. So now it's been 4 hours. You don't have time for something big because you're going to go change your clothes and go out into the field. So this might be the opportunity to say, I'm going to have maybe some pre-cut apple slices with some pretzels and a bottle of water. It could be that I'm going to have like a Cliff Bar or a Power Bar with some water before I go out, because the time is short. the time is short. And so oftentimes people will focus in on protein before practice. And protein, there's lots of great things about protein, but one of the downsides is protein stays in your stomach a little bit longer. And if the food's in your stomach and it's not in your muscles, it can make you sick to your stomach. You can get nauseated. You can vomit. So although protein is great for recovery, it's not something that you absolutely have to have if your time is short again, using that example of an after-school football practice. When you're looking at how do they recover from that, again, a lot of this is timing. It could be that if you're picking them up from school at 5:30 after practice, you could have, I'm a real big believer in the juice boxes of milk because they're ultra high temperature pasteurized. They don't have to be refrigerated. So if you're zooming from work, you can just throw 6 of those in a Yeti with an ice pack on Monday, and not in the summer, but for most of the year, they'll still be cool and they're not spoiled. Beef jerky goes really well here. Turkey jerky goes well here because, again, it's going to be a protein source. And generally after exercise, it's a carb and a protein. So before exercise, a carb and fluid. Afterwards, a carb and protein. And then certainly rehydrating with a fluid is a good option. Tournament play is different. So if you're going to a soccer tournament and you start at 8 and you're there all day long, moms and dads need to pack food. There's really, and my son played competitive soccer in high school and then played on a tournament team. And there's generally no good food available at the soccer field. Concessions are notoriously bad. And so if you're relying on concessions, you're going to lose. And sometimes the game goes over and you thought you're going to go out and pick up a Subway sandwich and there wasn't any time. So to me, it's packing something that is relatively low in fat and moderate in protein for in between games. So it could be a turkey sandwich, but I wouldn't put a bunch of mayonnaise or cheese on it because that fat also can be nauseating. So this is the only time I would ever tell athletes to moderate their fat intake or stay away from fat is in between those. So you see people going to the concession stands and getting nachos and cheese. No, there's nothing good about concession stands, nachos and cheese, but that means mom and dad need to pack. They need to pack. You need to have that Yeti or whatever cooler you're using in your car the night before. You need to have a variety of sandwiches, some cut up fresh fruit if you can do that. Apples, clementines are usually my go-to because they're just so easy to peel. Clementines could go in there, bottles of water. And yes, I'm going to say it, sports drinks are also appropriate when that time is really tight in between games because it's fluid and carbohydrate all in one beverage. I'm not a fan of sports drinks at lunch, at school. Lunch is not a sport. And you don't need sports drinks at breakfast. Please don't do that. It's really that, what am I going to do in between and what am I going to do when the time is short? Because it's carbohydrate and fluid, and that's where sports drinks can come in.
Okay, that's great information because I know that there's a lot of questions about that. So you're saying that if they want to have one of those bright red Gatorades, the best time to do that is like when you're pressed for time, tournament play, and you're just really needing some carbohydrates, and fluids.
Yep. And remember that this also is an issue for a lot of parents is they'll look at Gatorade or Powerade and say, well, all it is sugar, salt, and water. These things are not good for you. And in reality, as a spectator sitting in the stands, I don't need that. I'm not doing anything. Mm-hmm. But as an athlete, when you know what your sweat tastes like, it tastes like salt. And so a lot of the fatigue or muscle cramps that I see in high school athletes is they're dehydrated and they don't have adequate amounts of electrolytes. And so Gatorade and Powerade get damned all the time because people will say, well, the sodium content is so high and what about hypertension? And it's like, well, let's put that in perspective. if a bottle, 8 ounces of Gatorade has about 100 milligrams of sodium, the ramen noodles that you had last night had 1,300. So no, Gatorade has sodium. In fact, I wish all the sports drinks had more sodium in them for our climate here in Houston than they do. They're just a little bit too low in sodium for my preference. And so the need for electrolyte replacement becomes pretty critical, particularly say, for example, your son or daughter is a center mid in soccer. They could be running 3 to 5 miles in an individual game, and then they got to turn around and do that again. Well, they are not only fluid depleted, they're electrolyte depleted. So salty foods, pickles, all of those things that you've heard that people think are myths actually do work, because you really do need that sodium replacement. So sports drinks, to me, you shouldn't have them when you're watching or playing video games. Inappropriate use. But should you be using them in competitive sports? And I mean competitive sports, not if your son or daughter plays 3 minutes in a soccer game, they don't need it. But the starters would. It's a little difficult sometimes to say, no, you can't have it because you didn't play. So there's the psychological component to that as well. But strategic use of sports drinks is appropriate from middle school through high school.
Oh, that's really good to know. Okay. That's great to know. And to your point about electrolytes, I haven't been running as much, but I've been a runner for a while, and I really notice my electrolyte levels impacting my fatigue and having headaches and all of that kind of stuff, particularly in the summer. I mean, I would go out for 3 miles. It would take me half an hour. And even though my urine was clear, I could still feel it. So you're right. I mean, the climate here is so taxing on our perspiration, and I feel like it's something you have to be even more intentional about living down here in this hot, humid climate than you do in something that's a little bit more moderate.
100% agree.
Can I circle back to, because I know we talked about the proteins, and then we didn't get to the answer about the protein powders, and I know there's a lot of people who have some questions about that. So do you mind circling back to that and giving us your thoughts on supplements and powders and all of that business?
Well, the bad news is dietary supplements are at best poorly regulated in the United States. There was a recent case of a girl taking some energy supplement and ended up on the liver transplant list at 24 years old because of an adulterant in that product. And so we would never tolerate that with prescription drugs, but we tolerate that with dietary supplements. And part of it is, I think people believe that they are regulated, and they aren't. So bottom line is, nobody's watching the store. So when you start to think about what are you going to let your son or daughter take, a couple tips is, first of all, stay with a national brand. And so if we're talking about vitamins, it could be one a day, it could be Centrum. If you're adolescent or middle schooler prefers a chewable, it could be something like Flintstones. These are national brands that are less likely to come into any kind of issue. The ones that are made by small manufacturers, they may or may not do a lot of diligence on where they're sourcing their raw ingredients from, and so that becomes a little bit of a problem. So first, stay with a national brand. Protein powders can be of benefit. They tend to be expensive. Whey protein is the one that probably has the most amount of science behind it in terms of recovery, muscle protein synthesis. So it's the one that's going to get the nod. A lot of people are going plant-based, and there's nothing wrong with soy protein or pea protein or the rest of them. They just don't have the same biological effects as whey. With that being said, there is a little bit of a safeguard in the fact that there are now companies that are really trying to do the right thing, that third-party test their dietary supplements, which means that what's on the label is in the product. And so the two major third-party certifiers are NSF, NSF Certified for Sport, so Nancy, Sam, Frank, NSF Certified for Sport. And there's an app that you can download on your phone. You just go to the App Store and look for NSF Certified for Sport, and it will give you everything out there that's been NSF certified. So that's really very helpful. The other one is Informed Choice for Sport. And there's not an app. It tends to be more commonly used in Europe than in the United States. But there are certain major brands, Advocare being one, that has gone with Informed Sport versus NSF. With my high school and collegiate athletes, my son was an All-American at Oregon in track and field. There was nothing I was going to give him.
I just have to pause on that. That's really impressive. Because Oregon has the best track team in the country.
They do. And he was a 400-meter guy. And so was very blessed to be able to start his career at UVA in Virginia, and then finished his career at Oregon. And, a testament to his hard work, but also some of the great coaches that he had along the way. But there was no way he wasn't going to be drug tested. And so in my experience, and this is just my experience, that about 80% of the positive drug tests that I have seen in professional sports, the guy wasn't sticking a needle in his behind. His agent or his buddy said, hey, I went to the health food store and this is what I bought, and it really helped me. Mm-hmm. So athletes that are going to be drug tested absolutely need to do that. But I wouldn't want my son or daughter who's 16 not going to be drug tested unless they go to, on to college sports. I wouldn't want them to get something that this manufacturer, either it was contaminated, meaning that it's accidental, or it's adulterated, meaning that they did it on purpose to get some better benefit. So unfortunately for me, this keeps me up at night because working for the Texans for 12 years, the Astros for 10, this is the kind of stuff that worries me, because a failed drug test on that level, or you're an Olympian and you fail a drug test, you could lose your only Olympic shot. So you really need to be unbelievably careful with what you buy. And so, yes, if they're NSF certified, they tend to be a little bit more expensive. But if it's a difference between $20 and $30, I would honestly always go with the one that's going to be third-party certified. And then you can use them strategically. So whey protein comes from milk. So in that information that I gave you about oatmeal and dry milk powder, when you use Carnation dry milk powder, it's not a supplement, it's a food. So it has a nutrition facts panel on it. So if it has a nutrition facts panel on it, somebody's watching that store. Supplement facts panel, nope. So I can put dry milk powder into that oatmeal, and I get whey protein, and I get the other one that most people have heard of before, casein protein, because these are both milk proteins. Now, can't use it if you have a milk protein allergy. Please don't use it if you have a milk protein allergy. But this is an inexpensive way of adding quality protein, is using dry milk powder. You can add it to mashed potatoes. You can add it to other things if your son or daughter is not getting at least a third of their plate protein at night.
Mm. And I thought I had read at one point that whey protein can be a little difficult, like in term when you're having a protein powder, or that it's difficult for the adolescent body to break down the amino acids. Is that not necessarily true?
Not true at all.
Okay.
No, not true at all. So that's basically the biological availability of that protein is high. And human bodies, unless you've got, Crohn's disease or some kind of GI gut disorder, human bodies are remarkable at digesting and absorbing food. In fact, it'd be helpful for a lot of us if they were less effective and that you didn't absorb all those calories. So we're very effective at absorbing it. Again, if you look at the science, another really great person for your listeners to follow if they're on any kind of social media is Stu Phillips out of McMaster University in Canada. And his Twitter handle is McInprof, and he is the protein guru. So anything that comes out that is evidence-based, he also has a bunch of YouTube videos out there. Stu Phillips, Dr. Stuart Phillips, is a protein guru. And in his lab at McMaster, it is whey protein. It is whey protein that's going to have the biggest impact on the development of lean body mass. But I don't want to forget to mention this because we're talking about teenagers, is puberty determines whether or not you're going to add lean body mass or are you just going to get stronger. So sometimes people say, well, I tried whey protein and it didn't work. I didn't get any additional muscle mass. And part of that is, where are you in growth and development? If you're not to the point where, for guys, your testosterone is peaking, you'll get stronger in the weight room. You'll absolutely get stronger, but you're not going to get bigger, which is oftentimes when you're talking to a 15-year-old, their criteria for success is, do I have a six-pack? Can I see my muscular definition between my biceps and triceps? So it becomes, yes, protein can be a good idea, but you also have to consider where that young man or woman is in terms of their own growth and development.
That's a great point. Yes, they their definition of success is, do I have a big chest and how big are my biceps?
Yeah. Yep.
Which
exactly.
From the training perspective, I'm like, oh no. That's all on one side. This is not how you want to focus on your training. We gotta let's get a little more balanced.
Yeah, let's work on that backside. Let's work on the backside as well.
Exactly. Do you, and going back to I'm sorry to do the protein thing, but that reminded me, I know LeBron James has his ladder products out there that when you and I had talked about the protein, when I had emailed you about a different issue and the NSF, I did see that. And so I don't know if you have thoughts on that. And I know you're not here to endorse or to, say one thing or another, but in my mind, thinking about reaching especially young males, having LeBron James and a bunch of other professional athletes' names associated with a product might help in the messenger aspect that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think it can be helpful and harmful, because unless LeBron James is getting really good advice from scientists, those kind of products scare me a little bit, because sometimes it's their agent that just put together a deal and they're going to be the face and they're going to get paid to be the face. And won't mention his name, a professional football player who did just that. He was the face of the product. And I asked him, do you take this? And pardon my French, his answer was, hell no.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm not taking this. He said, it's not NSF certified. It's like, but you realize the minute your face is on this product, people are going to assume that's the reason why you look the way you do. So, in terms
so
of
true.
Yeah.
I do know that Ladder is NSF certified. That's one of the reasons why I heard him on a different podcast, but why he developed it is because he had such a hard time finding appropriate and safe products to use.
Yeah. So if it's NSF certified, the next step is, just because it's NSF or third-party certified doesn't mean it works. So a lot of it really just depends on who are you going to get your information from. But clearly, if he developed a product line, he's got his name on it, he's done the third-party certification, I'm thinking, okay, that would be a good place to look. I'd look at that product, because clearly he understands the dilemma out there in the supplement industry is that, man, it just needs to be certified. So that would be a product I'd say take a look at. But then the question becomes, do you know what you're looking for? And again, unless you got a degree in biochemistry or you're a sports dietitian, I'm married to a physician. He said, I don't understand all that stuff. Yeah. So it really needs to be a sports, I'm very biased. It needs to be a sports dietitian who's giving you the recommendation, do you need it? Because a supplement, as you and I would know, means it needs to supplement something. So, for example, I would definitely look at supplementing a female athlete's diet who is having regular periods, absolutely supplementing her with iron. Wouldn't supplement a 25-year-old male with iron ever, unless I had evidence that he had iron deficiency anemia. So to me, a lot of it is, who is going to give you direction on, is this product good for you? Is it something that you need to take? And that's what my colleagues in sports nutrition, I'll give them a shout out, excel at. They're going to help you not throw your money away just because somebody put their name on a product or that it's NSF certified.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's something too that as moms and as parents that we have to remember, that just because we've done our research or because a dietitian has told us, hey, this would be really great for you, Amy, as a 45-year-old woman, that does not mean that that translates directly to my teen males.
Oh, you are that, and that is just so spot on, Amy, because it's not just the supplement, it's what kind of dietary approach do you have, right? So you could be someone who had really great success losing body fat on a keto diet. That is completely inappropriate for your son who's a wide receiver in football. He's not going to be able to play football on a low carbohydrate diet. So perfectly okay for you as an adult to do it. Just because you've had success in one arena doesn't mean it's going to work for your son or daughter. And I think that becomes a little difficult from a family logistics standpoint, because then you're eating one way and your athletic children need to eat a different way. And then it's, well, I don't want to eat bread, or bread's bad for me, or I can't have rice, or oh my goodness, I looked at a power bar and it's 40 grams of carbohydrate and my mom said you only should get 10 at a meal. So I think when it comes to giving out nutrition advice, parents, and I'm sure your listeners do this with great ease, they need to understand the difference between what's going to work for mom and dad may not work at all. In fact, may be counterproductive for their athletic sons and daughters.
Yes. I feel like I could take about 4 more hours of your time asking questions, but I want to honor it. And I've already gone over what I said I would. So I want to can you tell us a little bit about how people can reach you? I follow you on Twitter, and I love not only the things that you put, but also the things that you like and respond to. And you just have such a wealth of information on Twitter. And then if you could let us know, what other resources you may have, how people can get a hold of you, and all of that kind of good stuff.
Well, Twitter is a good place, and my Twitter handle is just my name, at Roberta Anding. And so, I'll say I try and follow the people that I really admire and consider to be leaders in the field of nutrition. And there's some really great people out on social media, and then there's some people that are not great. So hopefully I could direct your listeners to that. Beyond that, I do run a small private practice, and people can contact me through my Gmail account, which is robertaanding@gmail.com. And so that's perfectly acceptable to give that out. 2 other remarkable sports dietitian colleagues of mine, Leslie Bonsi and Jen Ketterly, we decided about 1.5 years ago that there needed to be a consulting group of sports dietitians who have a bunch of experience. And I think between the 3 of us, we're probably approaching 100 years. And we have a small company called Performance 365. And the website there is performance365.org. And so there's a variety of ways that people could reach me. And depending on where your listeners are, if you have somebody who's listening in Atlanta, I could direct them to some really great resources in the Atlanta area, since the community of sports dietitians tends to be small and we all know each other. Generally, I can recommend someone in a major metropolitan city if your listeners have an interest in a different part of the country.
That sounds great. And do you work remotely as well?
Yes, I do. I have worked remotely. There's a little bit of a conundrum for us in nutrition on whether or not my malpractice insurance and my license carries out of the state of Texas, but I have done it. I'll say it this way. I don't think people generally are sue for sports nutrition information. I've never been sued. So I think that's probably an abundance of caution. But if someone, and I've done this, I had someone contact me from Spain, and they were in a remote part of Spain, and they really needed some help in their desire to marathon train in Spain, and they just couldn't find anyone, and I couldn't find anyone with them either, so I was able to help them remotely.
Got it. Got it. Oh, don't you love the internet and all that we have right now?
Yes and no. I'll say it this way. It's going to keep me in business because of the myths, and it's going to keep me in business because there's smart people out there that are looking for a better way. So there's pros and cons to that internet connection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. Like I said, I totally relate from the fitness perspective of that. Roberta, you are such a wealth of information. I cannot thank you enough for your time. And I know it's a busy season. And so just thank you for sitting down with me. I know this is going to really help my listeners and clear things up. And I'm envisioning them in the car with their athlete, taking them to a tournament and saying, this is what we're going to listen to.
Yeah.
So you might be the messenger for all that.
I might be. Yeah, there we go. I could be the messenger. And Amy, thanks so much for accommodating my schedule. And this was just such a pleasure to visit with you this morning.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much. I just appreciate it. And I will be in touch. Thank you again.
Sounds great, Amy. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
One thing I really loved in talking with Roberta was just her balanced approach to things. I think we've been doing this long enough. I really appreciate balance and giving ourselves grace in all things, and especially nutrition. I think it's easy to get caught up in the black and white, and I love how she encouraged us to think a little bit more in the abstract, especially if that's where our kids are developmentally. I had never considered that. I know Roberta gave us so many nuggets and helpful tools. What I have done is I went back to my college days. I re-listened to every minute of this conversation and took copious notes. And actually, if I had taken this good of notes in college, I probably would have done a little bit better academically. No kidding. It's like a solid 4 pages. If you would like a copy of this, head over to gracedhealth.com/fuelyourteenathlete, all one word, to get them. It's a free download, and I will send you all of my college notes. I tried to organize them in a way that made sense and that will be helpful and easily referenceable to you. Is that a word? Referenceable? Referenced. I think that's it. Referenced. I really need to work on my grammar. What's the one simple thing to remember from this conversation? I'm going to go back to the very beginning and repeat what she said. If you're too busy for breakfast, you're too busy to be good. How powerful is that? I actually came out of the interview, told my son that, and he kind of raised his eyebrows. He was like, "Oh, that's good." And I love that she was the messenger to deliver it, not me. Okay, that is it for today. Go out there and have a graced day.